they stood in opposition to the photographic expression of the time. It's not about style. Provoke shaped their style as they went along. But I didn't know much about that. They were critical of the status quo, and that's why they called upon me to join. Those three were involved in the exhibition 100 Years of Photography. They were on the committee, so they had studied the history of Japanese photography. I think that's why they had something to say about the photography of our period. His involvement with Provoke allowed him to help in shaping their voice and his own. He spent his entire career capturing Tokyo unlike anyone else, in a way that allows viewers to see how the city transformed over half a century, all while his own photographic style continued to evolve and change at the same time. This is Street Smarts Volume 32, Yutaka Takanashi. This video is brought to you by Enhancer Film Emulation. You can't talk about this photographer without talking about Provoke. I've covered the group extensively in another video, but if you're unfamiliar with this collective, in short, they worked to create unique photography that stood out in heavy contrast to everything else that was being created in Japan in the 1960s. And their work was an attempt to redefine the language of photography as a whole. Yutaka Takanashi seems to have been the most established photographer of Provoke's founding members. Prior to his involvement with the group, he had studied photography at the Nihon University College of Art, successfully worked in both commercial and artistic photography, and won several awards as an up-and-coming photographer throughout the early to mid-1960s. The work he produced always had a heavy emphasis on documenting cities, both from near and far, by focusing on cityscapes and up-and-close images of individuals, which might seem like a somewhat common practice now, but was apparently unique at the time. What stands out about Takanashi's involvement with Provoke is that, although not entirely the case, he largely avoided the are-bure-boke style that is recognized as being the key part of the group's contribution to photographic history. On the topic, Takanashi said, "My works were more static. Theirs were more blurry. For me, I believe photography needs to be in focus. So, that's how we are different." Moriyama blows up or crops most of his works afterward, and they followed the no-finder style, meaning they didn't use the finder while shooting, whereas I look through the finder, but I still accept whatever comes into the frame. So it's about phenomenology and epistemology. It's not a graphic approach. I think photography is a method of recognition. He was invited to join the other members in founding the magazine after Nakahira Takuma saw his images in a 35-page feature included in a Japanese photo magazine that were taken from his project titled Tokyo-Jin. He was drawn to join the group based on the fact that he found Provoke's rebellious attitude interesting, and perceived older photography as very redundant. There was hardly any creativity to it. Nostalghia was released in 2004 and shows the continuous change and evolution of Tokyo as well as Takanashi's work. It also displays a continuity between cities that have been captured by other noteworthy photographers throughout history. What stands out about this work, and other later work from Takanashi, including an exhibition and later book titled Niche Tokyo, is the long span of time that had passed in which Tokyo has been a central subject, and how he has chosen to capture it in different ways. For Niche Tokyo, he stated, "Banter between neighborhood merchants and customers, high-pitched screams of children, a momentarily audible accent that gives away a person's hometown, old people gossiping, and the icy laughter of the people. I thought I'd capture the spaces in which the niche reverberated with voices like these. I wanted to record spaces that are filled with in-betweens." Two projects Takanashi worked on that created a distinct vision of Tokyo in the 60s and 70s are titled Tokyo-Jin and Toshi-e. Tokyo-Jin, or People in Tokyo, was a photo series by Takanashi that involved, as the title would lead you to believe, the people of Tokyo. Takanashi has stated, "It is influenced by Robert Frank's The Americans. The city and its people were often the focus of Yutaka's work. This particular series came after Takanashi had already established himself as a commercial photographer with some accolades. Tokyo-Jin, however, was the first substantial work of his that wasn't commissioned. Where previous projects on Tokyo created prior to Takanashi's tended to focus on the suburbs and family life, his project stands out in contrast because it focuses primarily on the development of the city through the architecture that was building Tokyo up at the time, as well as the exclusive inclusion of the mostly young to middle-aged adults of the working class that existed in those buildings, going about their day-to-day activities. Released in 1966, This work highlights the changes that Tokyo itself and Japan as a whole went through over the previous 20 years, since the end of the Second World War. Beyond the architecture and representative age groups, the clothing, advertisements, and the presence of businesswomen also make this series a significant time capsule to look at the influence the West had been having on Japan during the last 2 decades. But this kind of documentation is something that Takanashi had conflicting ideas about. Quantity transforms quality, which in turn transforms the quality of representations. The city, at the forefront of contemporary civilization, emphasizes this phenomenon. That is to say, representation became an omnipotent god, only in the spiritual domain. By contrast, in a topological domain, where bits of matter intersect with each other, as a one-way viewpoint, becomes invalid. The only clue to understanding this organism called civilization will be found in the scars created by being torn between vacillating perspectives and a single, personal viewpoint. In other words, I'm constantly caught up in the troublesome wavering between the desire to abstract things for personal expression and the desire to materialize records. This is augmented by the obvious fact that photographs become the past as soon as the shutter is pressed. My aspirations to express an era simultaneously demand that I also photograph my intuitions for the future. When a photograph is shot, the traps that the mastermind set up with future predictions in mind pass through the present and knock him down into the abyss of the past. Toshi-e, meaning towards the city, is a book from Takanashi that explores cityscapes as the main subject, in contrast to his earlier work that focused primarily on people. This book was first published in 1974. It contained 116 black and white images, making it the most substantially sized book to come out of Provoke. This led it to be referred to by photography critic Jerry Badger as the last great monument of the Provoke era. It is something that is looked at as a bookend to all of what Provoke created. To create this work in particular, Takanashi often shot out of a car window while literally heading towards the city. These photos include all of the are-bure-boke elements Provoke became known for. In working on these 2 projects, Takanashi stated, "Just as I was working on this series, 2 conflicting creatures settled into my body. One is a hunter of images, aiming exclusively to shoot down the invisible, and the other is a scrap picker, who can only believe in what is visible." This video is brought to you by Dehancer Film Emulation, a plugin to help photographers and videographers achieve the look of film through digital means within the following software. For more information on how Dehancer can help you achieve the look of film on your frames by adding authentic and tested looks, compression, grain, halation, bloom, and more, check the link in the description. In 1977, Takanashi released his second book titled Machi, or Town. He said, "With Machi, I tried to get rid of being poetic." This statement is oddly at odds to what you might imagine it meant in terms of how the book was created. He had previously used a 35mm camera and shot in a more frantic way to create what is deemed his more poetic work. For the Town series, he switched to a large format camera that would have dramatically slowed down his pace as a result of the standard process of using it along with a tripod. However, he also created these images using exposure times that could last as long as 20 minutes, so he could remove any subjects and convey empty streets of lower-class neighborhoods all around Tokyo. According to Takanashi, the work was heavily influenced by the empty streets found in Eugene Age's photos from the early 1900s. Later on, he would continue to use that influence to capture photos of Shinjuku's Golden Gai, when bars were closing and devoid of life. These images were created in 1982, and once again show an artist whose vision is progressing in new ways over time. Pre-Landscape was released in 1993. From this series of photos taken in the 80s and 90s, Takanashi traveled the entire length of Japan from Okinawa to Hokkaido to capture both straight and abstract images of what he saw. The book encapsulates this through the quote that opens it, stating, "I walk on this flatland, with never any purpose." He also published work in the 1980s that used a 6x7 camera to capture images of Tokyo at night titled Visages of a Metropolis. The project titled Windscape from 2004 that captured the city from the windows of trains. And most recently, one called Silver Pass from 2008, where Takanashi took advantage of the low-priced bus fare offered to senior citizens through what is called a Silver Pass. This allowed him to capture photos of the city from a moving bus. Takanashi is currently 89 years old, and as far as I've been able to track down, his project from 2015, Niche Tokyo, was the last one to see exhibition. He has clearly lived a life dedicated to photography and can teach us more than anything else the benefits of continual evolution that can occur when you photograph the same subject repeatedly over an extremely long span of time. Thanks to Dehancer for sponsoring this video. If you want to know how to use their plugin to get a film look on your digital photo and video, check the link in the description. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, keep developing.